A few weeks ago, Marjorie asked me to do a presentation on the future of high-end audio. Any of you who can't hear, there's loads of seats down here, feel free. And I got this request and I thought, great, it's the poison chalice, and I got it. And then I actually started thinking about it, and I thought, actually, maybe this is not such a bad deal, because although they gave me the poison chalice, they had no idea what I was going to fill it with. And what I'm going to give you is a very personal view. And by way of balance, we've got a panel here from the industry, people who have been involved with and directly affected by some of the things that I'm going to be talking about. And that's why I've asked them to come along, because they will also have views on some of the things that I'm going to discuss. The heading for this talk is High-End Audio in the Future, looking at the bigger picture. What we're facing is a new reality. The marketplace and the way of doing business that we've all got used to and got comfortable with is dying on its feet. It's changing radically. And I was talking with Steve Silberman the other day. This is Steve on the far end there from AudioQuest. And he said, 5 years from now you're going to be driving along in your car and you're going to hear a song on the radio from an artist that you like, and maybe you didn't have time to catch up, maybe you didn't know they had a new album out. You just heard it on the radio. There will be a button on your steering wheel, and you press that button, and it's a buy now button. The radio knows what you're listening to. The button tells it you want to buy that track or that album. That track will be automatically downloaded to a destination predefined by you in a file format predefined by you. When you get home, you're going to drive into your garage, stop the car. Before the car turns off, it will sync with the system in the house, and that album will not only be on the system at home waiting for you, it will now also be in your car. That's the reality of where we're going. And one of the big questions is, how does high-end audio carve itself a place in that reality? We don't just get given a seat at the table. We have to make ourselves earn that place. And for any major manufacturer nowadays, the big challenge is going to be confronting the technology that they need to embrace to be relevant to that and be connected to that future, and also to reach the customers that have grown up with that level of automation and that level of technology. High performance audio is a world away from what I've just described to you. The way it operates, the arcane procedures that we go through to play records. I mean, I've just done a seminar upstairs on record EQ, and I'm saying, you need to buy a phono stage with switchable EQ. This has no connection with what I've just described. So we have to build that bridge. And let's just think about how this impacts on the market. And let's start by talking about manufacturers. Because ultimately, all of us, whatever part we play in this industry, whether we are journalists, whether we are dealers, whether we're customers, we ultimately depend on manufacturers. Without the manufacturers, there is no industry. So, how does this affect manufacturers? And the first and most obvious thing that's happened is that manufacturers have thrived for years on what you could call a conveyor belt model of the market, where people get on at the bottom and they slowly work their way up, upgrading their system until they keep it, and people keep getting on at the bottom and keep buying the cheap stuff and keep upgrading. And it's an assumption that we all hold that that is the way that the market works. And the reality is that actually it stopped working like that quite some time ago, and no one noticed that there were no new people getting on the conveyor belt. And we kind of brushed over it a little bit by just going on making more and more expensive equipment, to carry on feeding that customer base, which is getting further and further up the ladder. But we've got a disconnect there. We are no longer integrated with those new customers. And what they're doing is they're buying their products from a different marketplace. And that marketplace is basically the computer industry. And if we are going to survive as an industry, we have to engage with those customers, and we have to engage in that market. And that market is a very, very different place from the high-end audio market. Obvious examples. First and foremost, price. Computer audio products are ludicrously cheap if you look down on them from the peaks of high-end audio. This stuff is mass market, mass volume, high turnover, and most importantly of all, in terms of this discussion, low margin. The margins made by shops selling computer audio related products are much, much smaller than those made by shops selling high-end audio. And if we look at the products that have actually been successful in the marketplace, from high-end audio companies, they're limited, and I can actually think of pretty much only two examples. The first is the B&W Zeppelin, which has been an astonishing success worldwide, and probably makes more money for B&W than everything else they produce. And the second is the Wadia 170 iPod dock with digital output, which I'm guessing is something that was surprised at Wadia as well, which is why John's here. And both those products have two things in common. First of all, they both interface with modern music carriers, in this instance the iPod. And secondly, they're both very, very affordable products for the companies that make them. In the sense of, when I say they're affordable products, what I mean is, B&W make $800 and $20,000, and a Zeppelin is several hundred. And I don't know what a Model 9 DAC costs.
Well, the full system is $50,000.
$50,000 DACs, or I-170s for $379. And that is the reality that we're facing. And there's an interesting example occurring at the moment, and it's Focal loudspeakers from France. And if we look at the products that Focal have launched, I mean, most people are probably aware of the big Utopia speakers that get all the attention in the high-end press. But actually, the most interesting products that Focal have launched recently, and the most interesting, or the products that they have most interest in, are, first and foremost, the XS speaker system. This is, in the UK, a £400 money, 3-box speaker system, which is designed to accept an iPod input and a USB. And that is all. Those are the only inputs. It is marketed with the assumption that this is going to be connected to a laptop or a computer, and that's going to be your primary source. The next range of products they've produced is the Bird, which is a completely integrated system with Wi-Fi, with streaming capability. And this is where they see the market. And what is interesting about all of these products is they are all below the £1,000 price mark, €1,000 price mark. And I was speaking to Gerard Chrétien from Focal, and he said, what you have to understand is that there is a new high-end paradigm. And for people who've grown up with iPods and downloadable music, this is high-end. The iPad is a high-end device. That is as good as it gets. And it's €1,000. So why are they going to spend more money than that? So if you are going to engage with those customers, you have to be doing it within their marketplace. You have to be relevant to their marketplace. And if you look at the history of their products, the first thing they've done is they've taken their existing expertise, their acoustics and mechanical expertise to produce a system like XS. And then the next step is that they've merged with Name Audio in Britain, much to the chagrin of Name's dedicated followers. And people are wondering why. And the answer is very simple. they need more firepower. Name have got streaming technology and they've got server technology. And by merging the two companies, you're creating a bigger company with more technological capability that can engage in a much more competitive marketplace. And this is key. What you're going to see happening is there will be small companies that carry on doing what they've always done, that carry on supplying very niche, high-end product. But in order for that market to survive and achieve new customers, other companies are going to have to take on the challenge of engaging in that marketplace. And it is steps like the merger of Focal and Name that are going to make that happen. And steps like the fact that Solus Faber and Audio Research and Wadia are now all part of the same group. And when you combine those companies and those approaches and that technology, you actually have companies which are capable of dealing in the volume, capable of dealing with the fast turnover in technology that typifies that computer market. Because of the changes that manufacturers are having to take on board, we're also seeing knock-on effects to everyone else in the industry. And we can look at three different groups. We can look at magazines, and we can look at dealers, and we can look at customers. The print magazine is pretty much an endangered species. For years, they've been the blue chip arbiter of audio quality. For years, the universal road to audio riches was to make your product, to give it to magazine A, B, or C, wait for the review, and then in turn wait for the orders to come rolling in. It doesn't happen anymore. And I don't think there's any manufacturer at this show who will tell you that a review in Stereophile or a review in TAS is going to make their fortune, because it ain't going to happen. And in fact, nowadays, you can have a review printed and you almost won't even notice a shift in sales. This is how disconnected the magazines have become from the industry. They've got diminishing penetration, they've got diminishing readership, they've got diminishing circulation, and the readers they're reaching are the same readers they used to reach 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And they're preaching to the choir. All they're doing is saying the same stuff to the same guys. There are no new customers in there at all. And the problem with this is that as manufacturers come under pressure, the first thing that goes is their ad budget. The magazines exist on ad revenues. They generate those ad revenues by publishing individual product reviews. And the more individual product reviews you can publish, the more ads you're likely to generate. And that's their model. And as their sales go down, and as their ad sales go down, so their page count goes down, because they can't afford to print the paper. So they've got fewer pages to play with. They can't print as many reviews, and it's a vicious circle. So they have got a serious, serious problem. Not just because they're preaching to the choir, but because the choir has found a voice of its own. And the voice of its own is the internet. So now people aren't just accepting lock, stock and barrel what the printed magazine tells them. They're looking on the web and they're finding other voices and other customers. Oh, and by the way, they're seeing prices too. And that brings us to dealers. The big challenge facing dealers is that they've lost almost entirely their low-end sales. Because so many of the young emerging customer base is now moving into iPod computer sales. They're not buying those cheap starter systems anymore. Instead, what's happening is dealers are scrambling like crazy to hang on to the stuff they can sell. And generally speaking, that means the stuff that's not available on the internet. Because a customer walks into a shop and he's looking at a product, and it doesn't matter what it is. He could be looking at an Audio Research preamp. And he's thinking, yeah, that's nice, that does the job I want. The first thing he does when he goes home is Google it. And he gets reviews from here, there, and everywhere, and he also gets prices. And so what's happening is that if he's lucky, if the dealer is lucky, the guy will come back to him and say, this is nice, but I can buy it for X elsewhere. If you're not lucky, you'll never see the guy again. So the upshot of this is that dealers are making fewer sales, and they're making less money on the sales they are making. So they are in trouble. Customers. It's no secret that the economy is tanked. And what that means is, for a lot of people, that their upgrade plans are on hold. The money that they were planning to spend may not be available, they may not be able to commit it, they may have other priorities, they may no longer have a job. It doesn't mean they're not interested in audio. So, we're seeing a shift in customer behavior. And there are two aspects to this. The first is that customers are becoming more aware of the notion of getting more from the system they already have. So, whereas before, if you didn't like your system, you went out and just bought a new box, because that's what everyone's been telling you need to do, people have slowly figured out that you can actually spend time and spend effort, and probably a lot less money, on just making sure the system you've got is actually working properly. The question is, where do you look for information and advice on that? And whereas once upon a time you would have looked at a dealer, most dealers are no longer equipped and capable of doing that job. They've moved away from that job. So where do people look? They look on the internet. And yes, there's a theme here. And what we are seeing is the marginalization of sectors of the market. So the question is, what do we have to do for those people to stay relevant? And that is exactly that. They have to stay relevant. If they're going to survive, they actually have to connect and offer something. So, magazines. The first thing they've got to do is stop relying entirely on individual product reviews. The individual product review is a busted flush. Frankly, it tells you a lot less than you think it does. And it never has told you that much. And magazines have been selling us the story that these things are the be-all and end-all. They aren't. All an individual product review tells you is, if you're lucky, what that product does in that context for that listener. And that listener ain't you. So, that's not a great starting point. They've got to re-establish their credibility. The reason that print magazines held sway for so long was because they guaranteed a certain degree of answerability and process. They reviewed in a certain way. If they got it wrong, there was someone you could speak to about it. And that's important because the way stuff is reviewed matters. And it matters enormously to the outcome of that review and how useful that review is. And at the moment, again, the actual practice of reviewing is at an all-time low, I would say. And I'm a reviewer. Finally, they've got to start thinking in terms of the process as a whole, the reviewing process and the system as a whole. Magazines have got to start talking about audio rather than just about what audio you should buy. And if they do that, they then become relevant. Print magazines need to transition effectively to the web, make their content available on the web, and interface properly with the web. They're trying. Frankly, I don't think they're doing a great job. It's an alien environment for them, and they're still feeling their way. What's possibly more interesting, and I don't think anyone's considered, is that actually the better online magazines need to actually start thinking about transitioning to print. And that might sound like a weird thing to say, but I'm not suggesting that online magazines become monthly titles available on the bookshelf. But the notion that web magazines make a limited amount of material available, maybe on an annual basis or a biannual basis, in a printed form, gives those titles remarkable credibility and staying power that they don't necessarily enjoy on the web. Dealers. Dealers have got to remember where they came from. Dealers have got to remember that the key aspect of their job is adding value. At the end of the day, if you buy your audio research line stage from a dealer or offline, and it's $400 cheaper offline, why are you going to give the guy $400? The answer is very simple. If you buy it from the dealer, it should sound more than $400 better than if you buy it offline, because the dealer understands the product, he understands setting it up, he understands how to interface it with your system, he understands how to get the best out of that product and your system as a whole. And that is what dealers have got to be able to do to justify their existence. Because frankly, dealers take the lion's share of money out of this industry. If a dealer sells a product, he makes approximately twice as much as the manufacturer makes from that product. Why is the manufacturer going to go on tolerating that situation if the dealer isn't actually doing the job? And as dealers make less and less money, they're asking for bigger and bigger margins. So sooner or later, unless they can actually relearn their fundamental skills base, which is where they started, they're actually just going to get cut off. And once again, we come back to this whole question of the internet. As I said, once upon a time, the magazines were the marketing arm of the manufacturing industry. Manufacturers didn't have marketing people. They just got their product reviewed and that was it. That was all they had to do. Nowadays, the sensible manufacturer is actually providing his own marketing material. What the manufacturer is doing is setting up an informative, sensible, in-depth website which is accessible directly to and from his customers. He's providing the information that they need. The market is moving faster. He stays up to date. He doesn't have a year's lead time while he's waiting for the guru in the mountain to come down with the tablets of stone and actually print them. And what's happening is that now reviews are just becoming an adjunct to that process. So unless magazines and unless dealers can make themselves a relevant part of that process, pretty soon manufacturers aren't going to need them. Where does this leave customers? I would actually say that this is good news. There's going to be a lot of blood spilled. I mean, we are entering a really Darwinian era, and we're going to lose manufacturers, and we're going to lose magazines, and we're going to lose dealers. But the ones that survive are going to be significantly better than the ones we have now. They're going to be bigger, they're going to be sharper, and they're going to be better able to look after their customers. So, moving forward, customers are going to see stronger, more responsive companies. And the fact that increasingly customers can deal directly with manufacturers also keeps the manufacturer on his toes in terms of his customer service, backup, and support. You're going to get much more orderly access to information because the magazines are going to be called to account. And if they don't do the job properly, they're going to be ignored. And at the same time, again, the manufacturers are going to be filtering and arranging that information for you as well, which means that the baseline information about products is going to be more readily accessible and better laid out, and you no longer have to rely on magazines to tell you what's inside the product. You can rely on the manufacturer, and magazines can actually fulfill their proper role, which is to be to critique the product. Hopefully, you're also going to have a more informed and more capable dealer base, because the dealer is going to have to be capable of telling you not just what your systems, or not just maximize what your system's capable of, he's also going to have to maximize the opportunities that are now open to you. And as new formats emerge, and new ways of accessing music emerge, the dealer is going to have to be there to actually import that into your system and do it in a high quality way. So dealers that survive will be more useful to you. There's a big difference here between, for instance, the UK and the US, and I can't really talk about the US because I don't have the experience of it, and I understand the issues with distance in the US. I mean, in the UK we have this quaint term, visit your local dealer, and in the US that's not always quite so easy. But the people, the dealers that do survive, will be the people who are going to take your system and make it work the way it should. Finally, ultimately, because of all these things, as a customer, you're looking at potentially getting much better performance for the same monetary outlay. Because the systems you've got are going to be working better. And that way, when you make an upgrade, you're actually going to get the full benefit of that upgrade too. So, this is, for an industry that's actually lost sight of its standards, in my opinion, good news. Because it is going to enforce standards that customers, frankly, are entirely entitled to require and expect, and in some cases have been sadly let down. So, I don't think it's all doom and gloom by any stretch of the imagination. I think there's going to be a lot of pain for some people, but from a customer's point of view, I think this is an exciting time, and I think that there are huge new options and huge new opportunities to access music. I don't think you've ever been able to access music as easily as you can now, or the range of music you can now. And if this industry does its job properly, you'll be able to hear it with unprecedented quality. Thank you very much. That's my view. We have Steve Silberman, who is from AudioQuest. And the reason Steve is here is because AudioQuest is one of the few massive mainstream companies that is seriously engaged in the computer audio market already, and does it in volume and does it at a price that matters. We've got John Schaffer from Wadia, and John has experience of just how powerful that market is, and also of the pros and possible cons of company mergers. And finally, we've got Marc Mickelson, who I haven't introduced yet. Marc's in the middle. Marc is the editor and founder of the Audio Beat, which is, I think, the most credible online magazine we have. I would say that, wouldn't I? Because I work for him. But I wouldn't work for him unless I thought that. So, but Marc is grappling with exactly the issues that face other magazines, and I think he has an interesting perspective. And he is actively trying to develop a new publishing paradigm, whereas most magazines are just hanging on to the old. So, we will take questions. Yes?
How much of this, I guess I'll just describe it, even though you ended somewhat positive, as a downward spiral. How much of it is just related to the aging of the audiophile?
The fact that the industry is dying because its customer base is dying.
Well, yeah, I mean, like symphony orchestras.
Yeah.
I mean, symphony orchestras are going bankrupt because you go to a live concert, it's all white hairs and gray hairs.
Steve, do you want to talk?
I think this is the most exciting time in the industry. In the 18 years that I've been in the industry, I think this is. I don't.
Speak up.
I don't see this gloom and doom. I'm not necessarily in the same boat as Roy on a lot of the topics or the opinion season. None of my friends can afford any of the absurd audio equipment I have at home. I don't have a single friend that can afford a single piece of gear that I have in my house. None of my friends can afford the gear that I own at home. It's not relevant. It's absurd. That the $10,000 USB DAC is completely absurd. But all of my friends that like the system I have at home, all of them have RCAM USB DACs, and they all have them connected to their Apple computers, and they're watching movies, they're renting from iTunes or Netflix, and they're streaming the audio from the USB port or the Toslink into their DAC, integrated into their speakers. So I just see it as a paradigm shift. Nature abhors a vacuum. Roy's touched on a lot of dealers are potentially going to go out of business. Manufacturers are going to go out of business. Magazines may go out of business. And that's all great. I mean, Steve Jobs, everybody's been watching Steve Jobs, his commencement speech at Stanford. And one of the things he said is death is a good thing because it clears the way for new. It brings in a new batch of people.
I would totally agree with that. I mean, I think, yes, our industry is dying, in one sense, and our customer base is dying in a very real sense. But that's just creating space for for new people, and it's up to us to make sure that we're engaged in that space.
It's exploding in an entirely new way. There's a lot of dealers I've seen over in Europe. I was in Holland last year, and there's a guy who's opened up a chain of stores, and they only cater to computer audio. They do USB DACs, they do Ethernet, network-enabled things like Cambridge, Maine, Lynn, and his store is just booming. Every store I go into that he owns, and every time I go into a store, it's jamming. People love computer audio at all ranges, at all price ranges. Cambridge just loaned me one of their pieces. It's called an NP30. It's a $600 network player. And I would say that that $600 device sounds as good as any $2,500 to $3,000 CD player. That's a good thing. That's a great thing. So there's lots of interesting products coming on. And the other thing is that the consumer wants to listen to music in a totally different way than they did before. And so it seems like every generation has its cocktail when it comes to music, right? Like my parents used to smoke weed and listen to Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young. So their cocktail was like hippie rock and marijuana. And then my uncle's generation was disco and coke. And then the next generation it was ecstasy and it was
too much information.
We can all relate. So the next generation it was ecstasy and it was trance music, right? So like these aren't my family members. These are cultural phenomena that clearly have happened. The new cocktail of choice is caffeine and iTunes. Like there are more coffee shops than bars in the town I live in, and they're jammed from 6 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. And everyone's got their headphones on, and everyone's got their laptop, and everyone's got their iPod, and everyone's listening to music. People love the new drug, the new cocktail. So iTunes, headphones, and caffeine.
And one of the interesting things about that is that all those people are listening to 2 channels. So as a high-end manufacturer, they're waiting to be shown good 2-channel audio.
So the headphone world is blowing up. Computer audio is blowing up. There are all of these cool things that are happening. You held up the iPad. That iPad has the potential to be better than any CD transport at any price. You could never build a CD transport that would be able to transfer data as cleanly as that thing does. That can do asynchronous over the USB buds. An iPhone, an iPad, an iPod. Those things are going to replace. They're replacing CD players. I mean, outside of this show, they've completely replaced CD players. Apple's not going to sell computers with disk drives anymore because nobody buys any kind of disk of any kind. These things have phenomenal potential for performance, and that's the new generation. People are going to have 30-pin D to A converters that plug into their iPad, their iPhone, iPod. They're going to have 3.5 millimeter out on the other end. They're going to be able, the device will be able to recognize whether you're going line level or going headphone. And that thing's going to sound like a $10,000, $15,000 CD player. And you're going to have $300 headphones and a $300 DAC on it. And that's the changing world, and it's awesome.
John, do you have a view on that?
Well, I think Steve is always interesting. And I think he makes some really, really wonderful points. But at the end of the day, we also know that, in audio, one of the things that we do is we sweat the details. We have to pay attention to everything, and everything matters. So if we're chasing the ultimate and reproduced audio experience, there are some things that we can't overcome that just require a monetary investment. They require dollars to get there. Better power supplies, a cleaner grid, the quality of the components, the way that the circuit is engineered, and the way that it is optimized to really allow ultimate performance. So whereas I think that Steve has been 100% correct in his sharing his vision of this excitement of this emerging new market, we agree 100%. We've focused a lot of resources on what we call the Apple Premium market. And that is trying to reach this new generation of customers. As Roy pointed out, get more people on the treadmill at the beginning, but the experience they're going to have as they go through is going to be very different than the experience that we all had as we came on. And we have to try to understand what that difference is. But I do think that there is a place for performance audio and for pursuing that last degree of sound that is going to require there to be a learning curve. It's like finer wine. Once you have a familiarity with good wine, and you taste something better, you appreciate it, you desire it, and it's going to cost more. And that's going to be the same thing with audio as well. And that element won't disappear. But a lot of the excitement and a lot of the healthy indicators that Steve pointed out, we agree 100%. And we think that's what the future of audio is all about. We have to embrace it.
Yeah.
We have to embrace computer audio. We have to embrace this generation of people who are celebrating music, but their experience into it has been through a computer and a set of headphones. And we have to start to reach out to them and build a bridge into something that we know, which is maybe more of a communal experience, and sharing sound just outside of a set of cans. That can be a start into it. But then also show them that there can be another way to enjoy and celebrate reproduced audio.
Okay. Any other questions?
I'm basically at the front part of that treadmill. I'm part of that group of people where I realized that, the audio files aren't going extinct. There will always be audio files. And like vinyl is still going to be popular. It might be more of a niche market, but there's going to be people like me who are like, okay, so it sounds different as a different sound, and so you're going to have these new audiophiles who are still going to want to pursue that. But at the same time, you're going to have a lot of people who are introduced to this market through iPods.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out, well, what would be the best MP3 player, like you get the highest quality out of it. And so it's not that the treadmill model has changed. It's just it's a different part on the treadmill. It's a different treadmill, or different. It's a different process.
Yeah.
But the business opportunities, the desire for the audio, and even the desire for the vinyl.
I totally agree. I don't think the treadmill has changed. I think as an industry, the high-end audio industry has lost contact with it. I think it's the fault of the high-end industry. The treadmill's still there. It's just been peopled by a completely different industry.
And the audiophiles, we're here.
Yeah.
The music, when you hear it, you hear that it's fundamental. It's music. Music is something that touches all of us, and we all have different paths to it. Just the paths of change.
You were talking about basically about building this bridge, and what Steve and John were talking about is strictly digital music, and what he's mentioning is analog. And that bridge is being built very slowly. If you would have come to this show 5 years ago, how many turntables would you have seen compared to what you see now?
And how many headphones?
Well, yeah, that as well. But if you talk to somebody like Chad Casson, who just spent $1 million outfitting a state-of-the-art record pressing facility, he would say, my market is a shirt. That he would say, I know enough about this to know that I'm going to be pressing records enough to at least make back my $1 million investment.
And Chad never lost money yet. Sorry, we had a question at the back. The gentleman in the red shirt.
Yeah, I was just wondering, is there any source for actual numbers, data, for how much LPs are going up and CDs are going down and online downloads are, in different demographic and so forth? I've tried to look for some of it, but I haven't found anything.
LPs are really difficult to track because so many of the records that are being pressed are pressed by independent labels that don't participate in the RIAA facts and figures.
So there's no industry group that...
There's the RIAA, but really it's only the big four that report to them. There's so many musicians, DJs that create records that just don't report to the RIAA.
There isn't an effective one, I think, is the answer. So you can get partial data, but particularly for the DJ market, you've actually got quite large volume sales on vinyl, and those are going completely unreported.
We have an anomaly here in Denver. We've got Twist and Shout. If anybody lives here in Denver, you've been to Twist and Shout. It's a CD store that reinvented itself as an analog store that sells CDs, and they've done very well. They've made a successful business out of it. It's a record. They're still really important. And then the quality of turntables today, not just at the extreme at the high end. You look at
cheap turntables.
Look what Project makes. Samico imports these phenomenal turntables for, I think they start at $300, and they sound spectacular.
So, one of the things that I see there still is this disconnect of getting the young people from listening personally with their headphones to getting them into hearing it on speakers. beyond just the little desktop. And what I want to know is from everybody in this room is the fact that, to me, it seems like it's up to all of us also to make sure that we keep a connection open. So when young people come to our house, our nephews, our nieces, grandkids for some of us, that we take their iPod, plug it in, and let them listen to their music on our system, and let them experience it.
I think there is also a generational aspect to that as well, which is that the iPod generation are not actually yet living independently for the most part.
I would probably start disagreeing with that because
It's
we have a lot of
starting to
but it's there. And the thing is, you got to give a taste. My first taste of high-end audio was at the age of 12 from an uncle. So just saying, one day he saw me with some records I bought. He said, "Come listen to them on my system." So all of us in this room need to take a minute. When those kids come over, if they've got something, fire up our system and let them experience it.
And have the cable waiting with the jack on the end of it, ready for it.
Yeah, just have it right there. And it's at my house. My son who's 27, he brings his buddies over who've never experienced it, and they get to hear it for the first time. And it has to start
Absolutely.
someplace.
Absolutely. Totally agree. Sorry, you've been waiting very patiently.
Yeah, on the other side of that is a very big corporation that everybody has talked about. They make iPods and they make, and iTunes is their product, and that's Apple. And they have a big influence on this market because they sell a lot of MP3s and stuff to those nieces and nephews. They have just recently hired some kind of old-fashioned audiophiles, Thomas and Holman, and people like that. Do you think they are looking at the future also?
Sorry. Just in case anyone didn't catch that, Apple have just invested in audiophile expertise, is the point made. Sorry, Steve.
They've also been transitioning their portable hardware to accept higher resolution formats. So I think they started with iPhone 3 is capable of 2496.
Yeah.
iPad 1 wasn't, but iPad 2 is, and iPod Touches are, but iPod Classics aren't. So they've started to change their hardware in preparation of a higher resolution format. Whether that is 2496 or it's 328 kilobytes at 24 bits, nobody knows. But they've left the door wide open with their hardware.
They know more about this generation than we probably do.
Oh, yeah. They've spent more on market research than we spent on the entire industry. So, yes, definitely. Sorry.
Well, something that I've noticed or that I'm aware of, both personally and across the board, is that, as you say, the two things that I'm aware of are that there's no longer a culture around sitting and listening to something for the quality and saying, "Oh, hear that, hear that, hear that." It's like, I'm going to be doing something else, and so I agree with the gentleman who said,
Get him out.
get him out to do that. But the very real truth also is that this is I don't agree that this is the same conveyor belt in the sense that some people do, because what we're seeing is such a huge gap between rich and poor that the wealthy are really the only people most of these companies are going to aim anything at. Because the people who are down here, who are college students right now and have a little bit of money and can buy some technology, once they hit the job market, there are no jobs. And they don't have money to buy the next step up.
So if I can précis that, just for anyone who couldn't hear, if I get this right. Basically, one of the points you're making is, first of all, that listening for the younger generation tends to be an intensely individual experience, so you're agreeing with that point. And secondly, the economic situation means that many young people simply don't have and won't have for some time the money to spend on anything resembling a serious audio system.
She also makes a point about the companies as well, that basically what you're saying is that so many of the companies aren't really catering to exactly. Although I know that both, $379, and I know that you have all kinds of products that are very
I think the answer is yes. companies have to do that.
Well, one company's told me recently, that they believe that for them, entry level has become their used products. In other words, people that so much for them, they don't really sell entry level stuff because it's, somebody wants something, they'll go to one of the online sites or eBay or something, and they'll just buy something used off of there.
So that's
Gentlemen,
the point I was going to make.
Yeah.
AudioGone and places like that make it so much easier to get product cheap. The margin's out of the product already. It also allows me, as a user, to get rid of my audio gear in favor of getting an upgrade, and I can do it with no cost. I
guess
can
what
buy
it is.
stuff. I can buy stuff on AudioGone, try it out. If I don't like it, sell it for almost what I bought it.
And whereas it's online.
Yeah, it's
and,
all
and
online.
the internet is changing.
So that's a huge divergence of
How we do
the
it.
path to get to upgrade. And I've stopped buying it because I buy everything on AudioGone. I can be honest.
Gentlemen in the back.
Other than kind of touch base on what you said about people not having money, other than price alone, don't you think sheer real estate of one person's environment plays into that too? Space, size of speakers and amps and stuff like that. And where do you see that kind of going to?
Whoa.
So I want to take a shot at that because we've got an interesting a dilemma almost. We came out with a little product we call the PowerDAC Mini, which is a little digital integrated amplifier. And the idea was that the world had changed and that there were going to be customers who really responded or they resonated with the small form factor and they wanted that in their lifestyle. And we've seen that in the small DAC category that's been true and that's been successful. But it hasn't yet transitioned to the communal listening experience because this is an amplifier now. And what we found is, although it's been really successful, by our standards, we're very happy. What we found, though, is that the retailers, the channel that's out there, doesn't know what to do with it. We don't yet have the infrastructure in place to start to tell that story or to reach that customer, not in the existing traditional channel. And so we're trying to solve that problem, and it's really an interesting time. We feel like maybe we just anticipated the market a little too soon.
And one of the things which is really interesting about the Focal products that I mentioned, the Bird systems. The Bird is basically one box, and it's available with 3 different speaker systems. And you can have speakers this big, or you can have speakers this big, or you can have floor stacking speakers. And it is taking that space issue very, very seriously. So, I think that's absolutely critical. And people are used to things being small and neat.
Smaller, they're getting smaller and smaller.
Yeah, well, they got too small. I mean, the thing I like about this is that you can actually see the damn thing and use it, but you can get too small. But yeah, I mean, I think size is a critical factor, and I think the days of the half-ton amplifier are definitely numbered, thankfully.
I just wanted to add one question, which is that, as I'm sure all of these gentlemen probably do, any of us who want the upcoming generation and the next generation to be able to appreciate a deeper experience of music, we have to start our own blogs. That's the way that people communicate now in terms of this kind of thing. I was at a Walmart and this guy was looking at the TIAC sound system thing, and he's hitting the bass boost, right? And it's just like, and I said, do you mind if I ask you, sort of about how much money you're going to spend? And it was a relatively modest amount, but it was substantially more than this TIAC. And I said, are you finding that you're just looking for more bass? And he says, yeah, I just love more bass. And I said, have you ever had an experience where the bass maybe not as loud but it has some smooth sort of soul heart thumping quality to it, and it doesn't put you on edge like the heavy bass does. They said, yeah. And he says, that's actually what I'm trying for.
I think,
and it's blogs that'll do that.
well, I think it's an interesting point, because And one of the things that I said earlier is that magazines are preaching to the choir, and the choir's found its own voice. This is exactly what I'm talking about. The challenge for magazines is to provide quality information. The problem with the internet is we all know that 99% of it is knackers. 99% of it is not worth reading. So the challenge for magazines is to be there and be available and provide a better quality of information so that people are aware of what's possible. And currently I don't think that the majority of publications are doing that effectively, and I think you're absolutely right. Unfortunately, I'm not sure the blogs are doing it, well, maybe not blogs, but I don't think forums, for instance, are doing it particularly effectively either, because there's no quality assurance.
Yeah.
So, one more question if there is one. Sir, you were first.
Okay. 10 years from now,
Yeah?
in any of your experiences of looking and hearing in the industry, is there going to be something that allows the kind of sound that we can hear all over the place at this fest from something smaller, perhaps a brand new technology that would drag all of these MP3 generation people in and allow them to hear that kind of thing in a group setting in their apartment?
Okay. So the question is, 10 years from now, does anyone here think that we're going to have something this big that's going to be delivering the kind of sound quality that's available from the equipment currently on show here? So, who first?
Those magical
Steve.
I'm just really into affordable gear right now. I'm into affordable gear right now because that's what the industry needs, and that's what customers want. RCam has a cube. Has anybody seen the R cube? You guys seen the R cube from RCam? It's literally it's a cube. It looks like a center channel speaker. You put your iPod on top of it. You put that in a corner, and it fills up the whole room. So it's a different listening experience. It's not the soundstage listening experience, but if you want to make it big and full, and you want rich and dynamic, you put that in a corner and load it up in the corner, and it fills up the room. It's pretty fun. It's fantastic at parties.
Marc?
I would have a perfect answer for you, except you said en masse, in groups. If you want something that's truly of audiophile quality, in fact, in some ways, it's beyond audiophile quality, go over to CanJam, and you can find system after system after system. I heard a hi-fi main system over there yesterday. The guy pulled me in telling me, "Hey, you want to listen to some Dylan?" I was like, "Sure." It just happens to be Visions of Johanna from Blonde on Blonde, which is one of my favorite songs, and I was astonished how pure and detailed, the ratio of the two together sounded. It was just, couldn't believe it.
And those guys are easily as nutty about how they do stuff
They
as
might
any
be-
of the big systems upstairs
They
are.
might be nuttier.
Yeah.
in some ways, because, I don't know how many pairs of speakers you have, but I've come across guys that have had 6, 8, 10 pairs of cans, and they'll just pull one out depending upon mood or something.
They have more headphones than a lot of audiophiles on discs.
That's right.
John?
Yeah, so I think that I would agree with both comments completely. I think that in some ways we're already getting there. We're seeing the switching amplification technology is maturing. We're starting to be able to find ways to make it sound good. The miniaturization is happening, and it is possible. Price points, there's so much exciting gear at affordable price points today. And what we hope to be able to do as manufacturers and as building these companies is to create a path in from the headphone crowd and the computer audio crowd and give them the communal experience and then step them into all the way up to something that is truly, full scale. And the full scale reproduction at the highest level probably is always going to be pretty big transducers, and it's probably the scale of it in your living environment will be significant. But what can be accomplished in smaller and smaller sizes today is truly exciting. And so I think it's not even 10 years out. I think that we're almost here today. And I'd encourage you all to walk through the CanJam area. It's exciting because these are younger people, they're very passionate, and they're into performance audio. And so if we have events like this, where we combine our world and their world and start to commingle them, that's a step in the right direction.
My view, I can't point you specifically at a technological development like a flat panel speaker. that's going to revolutionize the size and scale of systems. But I actually think that if you walk around this show, you will find that a surprising number of the better sounding rooms have got small systems in them. And one of the reasons for that is that actually in hotel rooms, small speakers avoid some of the issues. But another of the reasons is that quite often those people spend a lot of time and effort on getting that system to work and getting it to work with maximum effect. And rather than just throwing a bigger box or more boxes or bigger speakers at the problem, if we go back to fundamentals and actually do the groundwork for the system properly, you'd be astonished what will come out of even really quite basic systems. And I think that's what's going to happen. And I think John's point about miniaturization is fine. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Systems are going to become smaller and they're going to become simpler. But what we're going to do is we're going to learn more about getting more from those systems. And that's what's going to enable us to have better performance from less complex, less massive systems. At the end of the day, there are mechanical laws that govern what bandwidth you can get out of a transducer. Fine. But, yeah, we've already seen what can happen with subwoofers if people start buying them with big enough numbers. So.